the webinar. I think there's Great. Hi, thanks everyone. My name is Rihanna Putnam. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the CSA. I have a few housekeeping slides and some notes about CSA, and then I'll turn it over to CSA's Education Working Group Co-Chair, Heather Vance-Chalcraft, to tell us more about our speakers and the resources being shared today. So the Citizen Science Association is a member-driven organization that connects people from a wide range of experiences around a shared purpose of advancing knowledge through research and monitoring done by, for, and with members of the public. This work goes by many names. You may hear us use terms today like citizen science, community science, or even C-Science for short. This association is home for the many practices and terminologies used in this field. Our efforts are concentrated into a conference and virtual event series, an open access peer-reviewed journal, and member services such as our working groups, online networking, and webinars like these. Our membership represents the multidisciplinary and multidimensional nature of the field and includes practitioners, researchers, educators, community leaders, and more. From all of our members, we hear that CSA is a community to call home, a place where we'll be welcomed and encouraged to engage in cross-cutting conversations to advance your work in these practices in ways that you won't find in any other organization. We recently launched a new engagement site called CSA Connect, pictured here, to facilitate more exchanges across disciplines for CSA members and invited guests. You can find out more about that on our website. This fall, we're excited to be launching short courses as a new feature on CSA Connect. The first one is on anti-racism, followed by modules supporting a new data ethics toolkit. We have others in the wings, including a longer cohort-based course for graduate students and their advisors, curated orientation to the literature base, the skills needed, and resources available to conduct and advise C-Science work as part of graduate level research. We have a few others, and I'll launch a poll, and I'm curious to see which of these courses you might be interested in. So if you want to just take a second to tell us, click any or all that sound interesting to you. This is something we're looking forward to this fall and hope you can join us. So we have the graduate research intro course that I mentioned, which will be an overview of the literature, a great opportunity to network with other advisors, and for the grad students that you're working with to get to meet other grad students. A peer review for C-Science. This is something that we've learned as a need through the work with our journal, creating a bigger base of peer mentors or peer reviewers for citizen science work. Then we also have some resources to do a community storytelling course. Great, just a couple more seconds on this. Awesome, so it sounds like there's some interest in lots of those. We hope you can join us. Our first course on anti-racism will be launching next month. And so CSA members will get the first notice on that. And so if that's something you're interested in, we encourage you to check out membership opportunities. CSA members can also join groups on CSA Connect to dive deeper into cross-cutting topics like education, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or data and metadata. These groups advance conversations around important topics and work to create resources for the community. And they're a great way to establish yourself as a leader in the field. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube playlist later this week. We have a growing number of webinars recordings available there on a variety of topics, including several on higher ed from a 2020 webinar series that we did. And then we also have a webinar with many of the authors from our special issue on citizen science and higher education that our journal put out last fall. So I encourage you to check those out. All of our webinars are led by experts in the field whose opinions may or may not reflect the association as a whole. CSA appreciates the time and contributions of speakers volunteering to take part in these webinars and the questions and input from attendees. So we are in webinar mode today, so everyone is in listen only, but we encourage you to use the chat. If you haven't already, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're calling from. And I know many of you are at university, so maybe tell us when your semesters start. I know some of you might start on Monday, others later this month. I'm curious to hear. If you have questions, we'll go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll try to pull questions from there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Heather Vance-Chalcraft, the PI for the USE Cit Sci Network and the co-chair of our education working group, to introduce today's speakers and topic. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Rihanna. All right. Today we're going to tell you a little bit about why citizen science may be helpful to incorporate in higher education, what it can accomplish, we think, with your students and the communities, and also give you some resources that you can use to actually implement citizen science with your classes in higher education. And so today I am joined with Dr. Karen Cooper, Dr. Alan Hurlburt, and Dr. Tobin Walton. And so I'll let each of them introduce themselves in just a second. I'm Heather Vance Childcraft. I'm a faculty member in biology at East Carolina University. And I have a lot of interest in how participation in citizen science can benefit students when used in a classroom. So now I'll pass it to Karen to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Cooper. I'm an associate professor at North Carolina State University in the Leadership in Public Science program. And I use citizen science in my teaching. I teach about citizen science. I have graduate students who study citizen science. Are you going to pass it to the next person then, Heather?
Great. Yeah, Alan.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Hurlburt. I'm a professor in the biology department at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm a longtime user of citizen science data in my research, from my naturalist and eBird and breeding bird surveys and that sort of thing. But I also have created a citizen science project called Caterpillars Count, which monitors foliage arthropod phenology and abundance. And that project has been used in a variety of higher education classroom settings. I'll leave it right there. Pass to Tobin.
Great. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Tobin Walton. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at North Carolina A&T State University. And I'm fairly new to citizen science, especially compared to some others on the panel. I've been doing some stuff with citizen science for about 3 years now. I'm very excited to be here and share some thoughts and some ideas with you all.
Great. And so now we'd love to hear a little bit about you, those of you who are joining us today. So in the chat, yeah, if you can put your name, your institution, anything else you want to share with us, including where you heard about the webinar today. Did you hear about it through a particular listserv or other sorts of places? We're interested to see who's interested in this topic. Here is a rough schedule of the plan for today, if you're wondering what you're getting into. So this is our welcome and introduction time. Then we're going to talk about some resources that are available through an NSF-funded research coordination network called the USE Cit Sci Network. Then we'll talk about the Citizen Science and Higher Education Toolkit, some faculty fellow lesson plans, and then we'll have some time at the end for discussion. So we're going to try and make this interactive throughout, though, with some opportunities for you to provide feedback, and feel free to throw questions into the chat as well. All right. Great. So today, basically, as I said, we want to talk to you about, what are some objectives that can be met by using citizen science in your classes, and then what resources are available to help you do that. So in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. Why are you considering using citizen science in your classes? Is there a particular objective you're trying to accomplish by including citizen science? So if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay. I think people are still typing who they are and where they're coming from, where they heard about this from. All right, well, feel free to throw in there why you may want to participate, student engagement, create student community. Okay, yeah, there's lots of different reasons that people have used citizen science in their classes, and lots of reasons why one could. Some people do it to teach specific disciplinary content. Some people do it to teach about the process of science. For some, it's more about involving students in authentic research or teaching about the process of science. For some people, they want to show students that you can participate in science outside of a classroom environment, and this could be a lifelong hobby. So there's lots of different reasons why one could incorporate this into your class. Oops. Oops, sorry, went too far. So one of the sponsors of today's webinar is the USE Cit Sci Network, and this is a National Science Foundation funded research coordination network. And USE Cit Sci stands for Undergraduate Student Experiences with Citizen Science. And this is a network in which Alan, Terry Gates from North Carolina State and I are PIs on, and you can connect to our website there, and you're going to hear more about it later. And basically, the goal of this RCN, this network, is to create a community of practice of individuals who are invested in using citizen science in undergraduate settings in order to broaden participation in science, increase student engagement, and improve student learning outcomes and faculty outcomes so that faculty have more positive experiences in their courses. And we do this by identifying resources that are out there, by developing recommendations on best practices or standards for use, and then facilitating the adoption of these resources or these recommendations through professional development and other means. And one of the phases that our network will be moving into, where we have not done as much yet, is actually working also with citizen science projects who are interested in having instructors use their project in their courses to make sure that these projects have resources available to facilitate that use. All right, I'm going to pass it to Alan.
Hey everyone. So, one of the things that we want you all to take away from the webinar today, if you're kind of just starting to think about using whether you should use citizen science projects in the classroom or how to do it, is that there's a tremendous variety of ways to bring citizen science into the classroom in higher ed settings. And it really spans everything from a full bore citizen science is the focus for the whole semester. The students are, from day one to the final exam, they're basically doing something related to collecting and analyzing and writing up citizen science related data, to something as simple as just a single class period, right? Where you're giving students perhaps just a little window into what citizen science is and what participation could look like. So the first take home message is really just, there's no right way or one way to use citizen science in higher ed. There's a great diversity of ways. Hopefully, towards the end of this webinar, maybe we'll have a kind of open-ended discussion where people can share some of their own experiences, and you can get a sense of that. But again, as I mentioned, so there are some examples. I know of Colleen Hitchcock at Brandeis University comes to mind as someone who has built an entire course around citizen science data collection and analysis, and in particular, she used iNaturalist, for example, to do a lot of her work. Whereas I mentioned that I run a citizen science project called Caterpillars Count at the University of North Carolina. In this large lecture course, students went out and just collected data on one occasion. There are a lot of things on this slide, but of course, you're thinking about, as an instructor, you're thinking about what your motivations are. What do you hope that students are going to get out of that? What are the actual learning objectives, and how do you build assignments to achieve those learning objectives? And again, your learning objectives could be as simple as, I just want students to actually understand that citizen science is a thing that's out there. And maybe the hope is that if they're interested, they'll get involved in it on their own. Or maybe, as Heather alluded to, a number of these maybe slightly higher Bloom level learning objectives in terms of really understanding better the research process and potentially simply getting more engaged by virtue of the fact that they are contributing data that is going to help others and science more broadly in understanding new concepts and ideas. So again, there's this whole spectrum of potential learning objectives, and then therefore a whole spectrum of potential assignments that you might give out. And some practitioners, for example, have simply had students analyze or graphically visualize the results of data collected by other people in a citizen science project. So citizen science can be a great way to just develop graph reading skills, analytical skills in that context. And then that more in-depth exploration is doing things from actually having students collect the data themselves. Another learning objective being understanding that scientific process and what it takes to actually collect data and understand the biases associated with those data, et cetera. So we will hopefully talk about more of those issues later on. But yeah, so right now it would be great to hear about, for the people on this call, to what extent you have already used citizen science in your classes, what kinds of classes and what projects. So we'll give people a minute to jot stuff in the chat there. Yeah, BioBlitzes are a great way to get a whole class sort of working to contribute towards better understanding of what's around them. Debris tracker is a great one. Again, getting people to care about their environment. I think iNaturalist is definitely a popular one, and another easy one, right, where you can do iNaturalist at a very surface level of just, hey, everybody go out and collect 10 iNaturalist observations, to let's do something with iNaturalist data, either individually or as a class. Is Never Home Alone is that an active project still? Is that still going?
I'm not sure if it is.
Oh, look at Julie there, covering all kinds of stuff. Yeah, Wildcam Growing Ghost, is that hosted on Zooniverse? Or it's its own
It's its own thing.
Well, that's a good smattering. Hi, Dana. Right.
Caterpillars count.
Yes, that's right. Dana is spreading the good word in the Toronto area. Well, that's great.
This is really cool to see, I have to say. Like, it's really great to see. And later it'll be great to hear like the great positives and negatives or challenges and cool outcomes that y'all have experienced with this.
I guess it's maybe almost 2 years ago, we sent out, the USE Cit Sci Network sent out an informal survey to the Cit Sci CSA listserv and a few other listservs, and so we tried to collect some of this info. But I feel like we're some of this info is definitely new to us. So yeah, it is great to see. Heather, did you want to do anything else with this info right now? Okay. So that's great, and hopefully we can hear more about your experiences, assuming we have time at the end. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the USE Cit Sci website and resources. So I'm stealing the screen share for a moment from Heather, and Heather, I know I kind of ramble sometimes, so just keep me. If I'm going on too long, just do what you did before. But so part of the, one of the goals that was on that slide Heather showed about this network is we want to make it easier for people who are thinking about using citizen science in the classroom. And so we want to be a repository for resources that might facilitate that. So here's the website, use-cit-sci-network.org. But it's hosted on CubesHub, so that redirects here. And we have a resources page. So I'm just going to kind of go over very quickly the sorts of things that are currently on the website that you can find here if you're thinking about this. One of the things we have is simply just, again, this is based on our survey, and it's almost 2 years old now, but this is based on a literature survey of published studies, peer-reviewed published studies that actually use citizen science in some higher education class. Now, these published papers that are all linked here, they may or may not have been publishing on anything about the educational benefits. It might have just been, this is a science publication, but it came out of data collected in that class, et cetera. But it gives you a sense of some of the diversity of projects and at least a starting point for the published literature and how that project was used. And we also, of course, have links. I'm sure everyone's familiar with SciStarter and Zooniverse if they're at all familiar with citizen science. So we have some links here, as well as this video from the CSA. So more importantly, and one of the reasons we chose to host our USE Cit Sci website on SciStarter is this, on Cubes. And for many people, this Cubes hub may be new, and I can't even tell you right off the top of my head what it stands for. But it's very useful. It's a source of all of these networks, collecting networks and connecting networks related to education in biology. And so I'm just going to go straight to this little collections page to show you an example. So if you are interested in a lesson plan, for example, how would I use Project X in my class? Well, let's just see how other people have done it before. The idea is that, and at the moment, we have just a few, but here's an example. This is a topic, citizen science-based lesson plans. I can click on that. And I can find a variety of resources that other people have posted. And so each one of these things, so this first one, quantifying and visualizing campus tree phenology. That sounds like an easy thing that could be done on most college campuses, right? So whoever posted this, and of course, it's the amount of detail is completely up to the person who posts it. So some have more than others, but in this case, they provide this little description. And if we were to click on it, then we find, oh, there's actually kind of a whole description of learning goals and objectives. This is like a full-blown article and describes the context in which they use this citizen science project, inclusive learning, et cetera. So this is an example of one where someone provided a lot of background information about how they used a particular project, and including assessment, inclusive teaching, the actual lesson plan itself. So this is basically a published lesson plan that we've linked in here because it relates to how you would use citizen science. Some of the others, and I'll just use my own as an example, because it's much less complete, I guess. In this case, it's just a link to a document. It's not that this hasn't really been published per se, but it's a document that describes, oh, if you're interested in using caterpillars count, here's all the ways that you can use the various, maps and graphs features. It has some tips for educators at the very end, background information for instructors, etc. So, that's on the maybe the less thorough end, but it gives you a sense. It gives you a sense. So the point of our of this whole resource collection is that, hey, if any of you on this webinar right now, because plenty of you have said that you have already used citizen science in your classroom, if you have some documents, or if you can just, maybe quickly write something up, take an hour or less to write something up and share, your experience as a resource here, where other people interested in using citizen science in higher ed classrooms can find it. And the trick is really just add, you can add whatever tags you want to, again, facilitate people finding the things that are most interesting or useful to them. So our intention is very much to grow this resource base. Right now, we're in this citizen science-based lesson plan section, but we have other types of resources. For example, we would love to see some examples of assessments that people have used to see what the impact of using citizen science is in your classroom. We have just publications related to using citizen science in the classroom, and some videos, etc. So the number and types of collections here will, again, hopefully increase, but it's community driven. So the utility of this as a place to come for research depends on everyone sort of contributing. And you can, of course, comment on each of these resources I just showed you as examples. You can comment on them. You can say, oh, this worked, but this tweak worked better, or this didn't work for me, etc. So again, having those discussions, we hope will just make things easier for everyone. And along with those ideas of commenting and like actually engaging with each other, we have discussion forums. So maybe if you have some discussion points that aren't directly centered around a particular resource, but are just more broad or conceptual discussions, then our hope is to have those kinds of discussions here. So we've only just started this website a little bit earlier this year. So we're really hoping to just make people aware of it and hope people start engaging with it. I guess just if you do have resources to upload, there are instructions here on this resource upload page. But it really is, if you want to go into more depth, and in fact, so that first one I showed you, where they have a full-blown lesson plan, and they've really they've basically written it up as a publication. That actually has a DOI, and you can do that. You can get something published as a DOI through Cubes, and it has a little bit more complicated instructions, just because, of course, you have a lot more fields to fill out. But just simply uploading a link, that could be the bare minimum that you do, and that's as easy as saying, oh, I have a citizen science lesson plan. I have just a Word document that I use in my class. Click New Post. You can drop the file in and then just describe the file. Add some tags, and that's it. So it really is super simple to create a new resource. And so we hope that for those of you who don't have a lot of time, but do have some existing things lying around on your hard drive, just get it out there. You can improve upon it, later on, right? You can always replace an updated file later on, but it's much better to let people know even that you exist as a person who's tried something. They can just email you, right, and find out more details from you that way. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing now, but I'm happy if anyone has any trouble finding the resource information or dealing with this account. The one thing, of course, I didn't mention, you do need to create a personal Cubes Hub account, which is it's a 2-click sort of thing. And then, of course, we encourage you, then it's another extra click to just join the USE Cit Sci Network. And that way you'll get all of our announcements and that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. And yeah, so that DOI feature is really exciting to people. I think people like the idea that maybe it's not formed enough to publish in Course Source or another peer-reviewed journal, but it is something that it is your intellectual property, and you want to maintain some credit for that. This is a great way to do that, so we encourage you to do that if that's something that is of interest to you. And you can access that CUBE site through this use-cit-sci-network.org site. It redirects you to the CUBE site. And in order to, you can see the network website, the basics of it, without joining the network. But in order to post and view resources, you have to join, but it's a free process, a couple of clicks. Great. All right, I also wanted to attract your attention to the special collection that Rihanna referenced at the beginning. Citizen Science Theory and Practice is a peer-reviewed journal focusing on the use of citizen science. And there was a special collection in December of 2021 that featured various uses of citizen science in higher ed. And you can link to it. There's a link down below, but if you just do a search for Citizen Science Theory and Practice and then look at the special collections, you will come across it. And you can see all sorts of different ways that people have used this, from use in large lecture classes, like what Alan was talking about with Caterpillar's Count. People have used this with educators, existing educators in postgraduate courses. People have looked at iNaturalist in all sorts of different settings with students, using online collections to promote biological literacy in entomology classes. Even in chemistry, how to engage students in chemistry lab research in a way that contributes to greater purposes. So all sorts of examples there. If you are looking for inspiration, you can skim through those different abstracts and see which ones capture your attention. And they're for uses in classroom, but then also other co-curricular activities. So using citizen science with student clubs or first-year experiences or honors college experiences. So lots of ways that this could be integrated with students. So I encourage you to take a look at that if that's of interest. All right, so we've shown you some of the resources available through the network, and we're about to show you some more resources that are available. But we wanted to hear from you, like when you're thinking about implementing this, or as you've tried to implement it, are there things that you've thought, wow, if I had X, it would have made this process so much easier? Or in order to think about doing this, I really need to find X first. What sort of resources would be helpful to you when implementing citizen science, so that as all of us and others think about developing resources for this community, we're actually meeting the need that is out there and not just creating things that aren't as helpful to people. So I'll give you 30 seconds or something, and if you want to go ahead and throw your ideas into the chat, that would be great. Yeah, lesson plans for climate change. The climate change is definitely a topic that intersects with lots of different courses, and there's certainly a need for students to understand that. Funding sources for university community partnerships. Yeah, fantastic. It's always so exciting to hear about all the fantastic work going on out there. And a lot of it is not apparent from the published literature. That's why, you know, building some of these resources in places like these collections can be so helpful to people, because you don't necessarily need to find a published paper on something, but you want to see, you know, what have people tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what are their lessons learned. Institutional memory, yeah. Application and data software. Okay. Awesome. Well, you feel free to continue throwing things into the chat. And we'll try and save the chat at the end, so we have all of this recorded. But now I would like to pass it over to Karen and Tobin to talk about the Citizen Science and Higher Education Toolkit.
Great, thanks. I'll get us started. Yeah, so we made a tutorial as part of a collaborative effort with a National Science Foundation grant that was led by North Carolina A&T along with NC State. And in this, like, we started out actually with NC State, which our group, our team had more experience at the start with citizen science and teaching in higher ed with citizen science. So we started out giving workshops with faculty over at A&T, but then really quickly these became very collaborative. And then we realized that we could really just synthesize all that we're doing together and create like a self-guided online interactive tutorial that would help kind of get any of the programs that we're doing. It's like a starting point. And I guess before I go into that, just wanted to emphasize that we made the tutorial focused on leveraging like existing citizen science projects into higher education courses. So they weren't about creating citizen science projects. We have other efforts in this grant at our institutions that are related to the role that instructors and their students might take in community science efforts. But in this tutorial, we focused on instructors who are really not collaborating with a particular community partner. They're focused on the teaching. And so we offer what's really comparably the lower hanging fruit of using existing citizen science projects in their teaching for specific learning goals. And it itself, you know, I say it's low hanging fruit, but it actually presents a lot of challenges and a lot of different rewards. And so can you go to the next slide? So the tutorial that we made is hosted as one of several that are on SciStarter. And the prerequisite for it is one that some people were talking about in the chat, is the foundations of citizen science. And it's a prerequisite for a few reasons, but really just to get everyone on the same page, same like baseline understanding about citizen science projects and how to access them. And also because it is a really good thing to assign to students to prepare them before they begin whatever the classroom assignment is. And so it's good for instructors to already have done the foundations themselves before they assign it to students. Anyway, and then I encourage you to check out the other tutorials, but the one that we have, it just launched, is called Teaching in Higher Education with Citizen Science. And if you go to the next slide, this just is covering just the basics. We estimate it takes about 2 hours to complete. And here's just sort of the learning objectives that we say by the end of the tutorial, be able to identify the benefits of including citizen science experiences in your courses, identify the utility of citizen science from the perspective of multiple learning theories and effective pedagogical approaches to undergraduate learning, like experiential learning, things like that. Select citizen science projects that align with your course learning objectives. Select assessment approaches and different tools that align with the citizen science projects and course learning objectives. So we basically start with learning objectives, build on the projects, build on the assessment, recognize the importance of aligning all of that, the pedagogy, the learning objectives, the assignment and classroom activities, the assessment of the learning outcomes. And then we conclude with identifying different, or that you'd be able to identify different resources and strategies to help prepare students for undertaking these projects. If you go to the...
Can I add something real quick, Karen?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, I was on a roll. Sorry, Tobin.
You were
go
on a
ahead.
roll. I had to stop you. And can we go back one slide, Heather? Are you advancing? Can we go back one more? Thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to point out, in my introduction, I had said that I'm fairly new to citizen science, and I had tried and failed several times prior to making this tutorial with Karen, for sure. And when we started to put these together, what the learning outcomes would be for people who actually completed it, I think we really dug deep to figure out what are the basic things that people would need to have to understand both the value of bringing citizen science into your courses, as well as just like the practical application of, what types of things you need to think about. And so, these 6 learning outcomes took a lot of time to really kind of craft, and a lot of heartache on my students and my part trying to implement certain things and failing. So I think it's a good tutorial. I'd love for you to try it. Now we can advance. Thank you. And on that note, this is just one of the slides from the tutorial, and we start out, at the very beginning, just kind of talk about what are the benefits, and we feel like, a lot of faculty are looking to do certain things to enhance learning for their students, to make it more interesting, to make it more relevant. I know for my students in particular at A&T, there's just a real concern among the students that science is sort of irrelevant, and you don't see it. It's never around. You hear about it. It's a word. It's a practice, I guess. But what does it actually do in the world? And so one of the key benefits that I've found to bringing citizen science into my classes is it makes scientific research relevant to students' everyday lives and the communities they live in. And so that's how the tutorial sort of begins and kind of frames things that way. Can you advance the slide now? So that being said, I've already sort of shown my cards as somebody who's tried and failed lots of things. So what are some of the challenges that you've encountered when you've tried to implement citizen science in any way, shape, or form in your classes? We'd love to see you share some things in the chat. And as a follow-up kind of question too, it might be interesting to see if you've used it for extra credit purposes, or have you used it as required work? I know that people in our sphere at A&T have done it both ways. Karen says people are cheating, for sure.
Well, and Alan said that too, falsification, yeah.
Making students understand the importance of the activity.
I had a student from Appalachian State upload a picture of a leafhopper from Australia. Their assignment was just to go and look at a branch and take photos of what they found, but I tracked the actual image down, and needless to say, that was not an invasive species. They just grabbed a photo from the internet.
Yeah, we saw that too. Internet grabbing photos from the internet for iNaturalist.
Student difficulty in creating accounts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the challenges I've faced is just clearly stating the instructions for students so they can follow. I have sort of multiple steps they have to go through, and that's been a learning curve for sure, trying to communicate to students exactly what I'm expecting them to do.
Yeah, and these preconceived notions, sometimes there's a little bit of unlearning before students can learn. Just gonna go, or can we go to the next? People can still keep adding, but we're just looking at the clock. Or we have an hour, is that right? I can't remember how much time we had for this.
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this was just to show one of the just a glimpse of the tutorial, because we were mentioning that it was interactive. It's self-paced. You can do a little bit of it, you can leave, you can come back, it'll pick up where you left off. You can, if you make an account when you do it, like a SciStarter account, you can claim a badge and a certificate afterwards. Like a badge is through LinkedIn and whatever, like through Badger. But anyway, it's interactive. There's certain videos. This is a kind of thing, like there's a section on data integrity, research integrity, for like helping students understand some of the concepts of research. Oh, 90 minutes. Okay, thanks. Of research integrity. So like each of these is like a little, you click it and it's a little flip card, and you click, I want to know about falsification, and you flip, it'll turn around, it'll say what that means, or fabrication. Oh, that's making up data or results. That kind of thing. If you go to the next one, this is another example. Just there's a section on sort of explaining the differences and similarities and differences between research, evaluation, and assessment. And each of these tabs has a different definition. And then there's kind of goes on to talk about scholarship of teaching and learning, and sort of the kinds of publications that you can do related to research and assessment of your classroom like intervention.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see at the end, if we have some time, from the chats, it looks like a lot of people are doing a lot of different things with this. And I know in my own classes, sometimes I'll give out little questionnaires, or I'll ask students for, some feedback. And, I don't do that for the purposes of publication. I just, for the purposes of continuous improvement. And I'd be curious to see, how much people are doing it in that regard. And there may be some real chances for collaboration across faculty and universities to try to really get some increased knowledge about how this is impacting students, if it's impacting them at all. But of course it is. We all know it is.
There's a question about how students can earn a badge. So with that foundations in citizen science tutorial that I said was sort of the prerequisite, even for our tutorial, the foundations tutorial is great to assign to students. And if they complete it, along with a few other steps on the SciStarter page, then they get instructions. I think it's through an email on how to claim their certificate and how to claim their badge. And I guess that has instructions too on how they can have their badge on LinkedIn and other kinds of places that are compatible with Badger. So,
which is a nice thing. And I think there's a question in the chat earlier about whether the foundations could be used as something in the class. And for every one of my classes, that's the first thing I have the students do. Well, not the first thing, but one of the very first things is they complete that foundations tutorial. Then they get that badge. And then that's sort of like a formative assessment. So I know they've done it, and we can move to the next step for sure.
Yeah, it's considered a micro credential. And you can make it a prerequisite to a course, or you can just make it like the start of any assignment. And then our tutorial on higher ed, citizen science in higher ed, that also you as the instructor, if you want, can claim a badge and a certificate through that same process.
Next slide, please. Yeah, and so just again, another illustration of some of the content in the tutorial. So the tutorial does link out to a video created by SciStarter on making a list. If you're familiar what lists are, I'm sure many people here are. It's a nice way to direct students to a small number of citizen science projects that maybe you want to allow them some choice in what project they engage with. And so you can create a list and you can direct students. You can just copy a link and provide that student, or provide that link to your students. They can then go and see a small list of, say, 5 different citizen science projects. And you can say, hey, pick one of these projects and contribute data to it and whatever you have them do. But the SciStarter list is a really nice sort of feature. Karen?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on that. One of the reasons I like the list feature is for the analytics, because I assign milestones to my students, because one way to ensure that they don't like falsify data or grab a photo off the web is to make sure they don't do the assignment the night before, but that they really show certain milestones along the way. And with the SciStarter list, even if I'm assigning one project, I like to send them to the list, because I can see on the back end on SciStarter analytics when a student has completed, when they have visited the list, when they've completed making their SciStarter account, when they have joined the project that I've asked them to do. And I can see for certain projects, if they're affiliates, when they've contributed to that project, or if I've asked them to contribute 10 times to that project or whatever, it tallies and it shows. And I can download that. I can download it periodically. Like if I ask them to do 5 contributions to iNaturalist, by week 2, I downloaded it week 2 and I can always check it. and then 5 more by week 3, whatever. So the list is good for a lot of different purposes. It's a feature that anyone can use on SciStarter. I don't think it is all that well known. So I just wanted to, should we, I don't know if it's gonna, if the sound will come through if we're not if we didn't log on in the right way, but I don't know if we should play I don't remember how long the video is.
We'll give it a shot. It's not very long.
Hi, this is the SciStarter team. Today we're bringing you a new feature on SciStarter.org, the lists. In this short video, we're going to talk about 3 things. What is lists, how you can use lists, and what to do if you need help. First, what is lists? SciStarter showcases thousands of citizen science projects, so browsing them can be a little bit overwhelming. With the lists feature, you can find, save, organize, and share citizen science projects of your choice. How you can use lists? You can create, edit, and share lists. You can also view your list's participation stats. Here's how. To create a new list, go to any project on SciStarter.org. You'll see the Add to My List button here. Click on it. In the pop-up, type in the name of your new list, then click on the name and click Add to List. If you want to put the project in one of your existing lists, just click the downward arrow and select the list you want and click Add to List. Please note that a project can be added to multiple lists. If you change your mind, you can remove the project from one of your lists. When you're done, you can view all your lists by clicking Go to My List. Use the fields under the list name and the project name to add more information. The text you have entered will be auto-saved. All the lists are public by default. Your public lists can be seen in your public profile. Private lists cannot be shared or viewed by others. To share your list with others to get them involved in citizen science, just click the Share button and click Copy. Then the link of your list is already in your clipboard. Paste it anywhere you want. To remove a project from a list, click here. If you want to delete an entire list, click the red button here. SciStarter is partnering with its affiliate projects to get citizen scientists' contributions credited on SciStarter. If you want to know how your list receivers are doing with the projects you've shared, just click the list and select Stats View. Affiliate projects are marked with a star. You can see who made how many contributions to what affiliate project after viewing your list at what time. You can also see when they first joined a project and their total contribution since. For non-affiliate projects, some stats are not available.
That's probably
To download these data, just click here. Next, we're going to talk about how to participate in the projects of a list that someone has shared with you.
Heather, I think that's probably good enough. Thanks. And I'll just say that when they were showing like all the details, you could add other instructions about each project that you want on your list. That's where you can put instructions to the students, just additional instructions.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move into just a little discussion about another project that we engaged in this summer, a faculty fellows program. And again, this was both at North Carolina State and NC State University. And what we did was we recruited faculty that would be interested in learning something about citizen science and bringing citizen science into their courses. We recruited 4 faculty from each institution, and then we put them through sort of a training kind of collaborative set of meetings where we began with, of course, the Foundations of Citizen Science tutorial, SciStarter. Each of the fellows also completed the tutorial that we've just been speaking about. And then over the course of several weeks or several meetings, we had them identify a course that they'd like to bring citizen science into to try to help achieve student learning outcomes. And then they created an entire learning module for that course that they're going to be implementing then this fall. And one of the things I'd just like to point out about each of the faculty members here is that they come from many different disciplines, right? We've got people in the social sciences, we've got people in educator preparation, mathematics, biology, ecology. So no matter what discipline you teach in, you can probably find an application for citizen science in some way, shape, or form. And so now we're just going to share a brief summary of a couple of the fellows modules that they created. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so this one came from Jennifer Landon. And what was cool here was, I think she was our only one who was teaching a really large remote course, like distance learning kind of course. And she was really, really wanted to find activities that students could do wherever they lived, like, and whatever that would be safe and accessible outdoor experiences. And so it was an intro biology class, and asynchronously taught. Anyway, and so she came to the fellows program thinking that citizen science would be a really good way to reach some of the goals of her class, which was that she wanted her students to engage with the science community, like in large, to have them increase their awareness about environmental issues, to develop sort of an environmental sense of place where they lived, to be able to reflect on culture's role in influencing their choices. Like there was a big focus on sustainability and sort of the consumer side of sustainability, like the personal choice side, because part of the focus was sort of an efficacy approach of like having individuals be able to take action in order to reduce this sort of eco-anxiety. And if you go to the next slide, so she chose actually 4 projects that they were going to do over the course of the semester that had different kind of sustainability emphases. And her plans at the time were to sort of examine self-efficacy in a pre and post kind of way. Anyway, and she just has it all kind of set out like with sort of different steps and milestones each week that involve like getting familiar with setting up their account, getting familiar with the project, understanding research ethics, and then taking the time to do the projects. And with that, she has these reflection prompts for the students. And then that's repeated again with each of the subsequent projects. And then I think I had another example from our instructor who teaches students who are teachers who are going to be math teachers in public schools or in K through 12, or mostly in middle school actually for this teacher. So he's teaching teachers to teach math. And at first when he came, he thought he wanted to just use citizen science data sets and have his students like use those data sets. And then he realized that actually it would be useful because one of the challenges he finds is that that kind of just handing data sets to students, often these canned data sets that are often like already really clean or whatever, they don't have that prior experience of gathering the data. It's, yeah, I can't remember the terms that he used, but it wasn't really fulfilling fully the goals of having them like really appreciate the depth and richness and the challenges of working with data. And so he chose Globe at Night for his teacher students to participate in Globe at Night. And so that they would have that really rich and intimate experience with collecting data, as well as then analyzing data. And his whole class is based on this data investigation cycle that they work through. And then you can see his learning objectives here, which basically relate to that sort of life cycle. I was going to add too that one of our teammates here at NC State, who's been really valuable to the project, teaches English for first-year students, and she uses citizen science in the classroom every semester, offering the students to choose from a myriad, a really large selection of citizen science projects that suit their interest, and then they write about it. And so towards their experiences in this citizen science project. Anyway, so I just like to sort of build on what Tobin was saying, that so many different disciplines, it isn't just like in the sciences, like our colleagues across campus have this interest in using citizen science in the classroom.
Awesome. Yeah, so just a couple of examples from the fellows at A&T, and really to highlight now, what I think Karen has already spoken about, that when we get interested in using citizen science, it seems like we really have a purpose. We really have something we want to give to students, or something that we want students to experience. And so, and this goes beyond just the learning outcome for the course. So, one of our fellows teaches Calculus 2 for math majors. And, he struggles with, as I kind of alluded to earlier, students understanding, what's the point of calculus, right? And he likes to say, you can do science with statistics and more basic math and calculus. So why do we even need calculus? And so that's kind of where he started. He wanted to find a use for citizen science to communicate to students the use of calculus. And it took us a while, but he ended up finding a nice project, a Coco Roz project. And here are his learning objectives. He wants students to be able to describe citizen science in relation to regular science, quote unquote regular, and how they may be different. He also is going to have them then access research and data from that citizen science project, which gathers information on rain, hail, and snow from across the country. And I don't know if that's a global project. I think it's just the United States, but it could be global. And then what they're going to use is they're going to use integral calculus techniques to analyze hail data from different areas throughout the country. And so that's his way to say, look, see, and he likes to talk about insurance actuaries and how they manage and assess risk, and how calculus could be involved in assessing the amount of risk from hail in coming months by insurance companies. So I thought that was a unique way to use it. And then another fellow, one of my colleagues in the sociology department, is participated in the fellows program, and he's going to implement a citizen science project in his sociology internship course. And this is a little bit different of a project. We've been on a separate grant where we're in the middle of creating a citizen science project of our own in collaboration with a couple of community-based organizations. And so similar sort of learning outcomes for this project at the beginning. We want the students to understand the difference between citizen science and what traditional science is. There's value to that. But then students will also be engaging with community organizations. They'll be meeting with them. They'll be talking to them, participating in interviews and focus groups with them. They'll also then, once the citizen science project is up and running, it's basically a project that's going to gather information from citizens in low-income communities about issues they see in regards to housing and transportation. And so students in this internship class will sort of be the people who are accessing, managing, and analyzing and evaluating the data from the community about their concerns about local housing and transportation issues. And then with that information, they'll also be authoring a basic social science report to give back to the community organization. So again, a very, very different way of using citizen science than some of these other things that we've talked about. Next slide, please. Karen, you want to do this one?
I guess
I forgot to let you go there. You started, you can round us off.
Okay, this was just some of our closing thoughts about, I think we've used this slide before too, of just like things to consider, like just that there are a lot of real challenges and things we might not think about at first when using, like, when we want students to have like an experience with real science, it's like, oh, well, that carries a lot of responsibilities and challenges. And it is good, like we sort of alluded to earlier, for the instructor to try everything first, like to go through all the steps, because you will see like the complications. We emphasize a lot, really being clear about course learning objectives and making sure things align with them. Also considering the citizen science project that you're using, because if it's not your own project, You might want to get in touch even with those who run the project, let them know you're using it with students. Let them know, if they have any concerns, or maybe they have certain resources that can be supporting. Anyway, so that's just to recognize that you're then a facilitator of a citizen science project with a certain set of participants. And that also comes with responsibilities. We've been having a lot of discussion lately about grading or not grading or ungrading, or like how you don't want to like in outside of an academic setting, right? People come with a very intrinsic motivation to participate in a project. If they come to a project, they're intrinsically motivated to do so. There's less concerns about any like bad incentives that they might have for being sloppy or whatnot. Whereas if a student is assigned a project and is going to get a grade on it or something, like it can create inappropriate incentives and perhaps affect data quality or the integrity of the project. So it's like that kind of balance and those kinds of things to think about from the student's perspective and sort of the motivations perspective. So really, and doing what you can as an instructor to help students understand the importance of data quality, perhaps scaffolding their experiences, having these milestones for their experiences, all those kinds of things, making them understand about data integrity, research integrity, and how it's similar like to a code of conduct with students. It's the same. You don't cheat on homework. You don't cheat with a project. That there's ways to verify, that students have done the tasks that you hope that they do, like using those list features. There's concerns, there might be challenges that you face regarding student privacy, and this just is in, whether it's through SciStarter or just directly with a project. Some projects, a lot of projects require enrolling in them, right? Making an account, which students may not want to do or may not be fair to ask students to do. So there are projects that students can participate in anonymously with never making an account. And so if that privacy is an issue, you might want to look into those projects. It's just a lot harder to, it just depends on the learning objectives and what you need to keep track of and whatnot. Which is related to that last point about requiring. And then like considering, disability and accessibility and those kinds of issues with your students. And knowing, which projects, whatever can work with people who have visual impairments or, or mobility constraints, like all those kinds of things you need to take into account also in part of, having an inclusive classroom. And then Heather, I'm going to hand it back to you, I guess, for a discussion that we might have coming.
Thanks. So you've heard some from us about why you may want to include citizen science in your courses, and many of you are doing it already. You've heard a little bit from us about collections of resources available through the USE Cit Sci Network, through the tutorial, and through these lesson plans. And incidentally, I believe the lesson plans will eventually be housed on the USE Cit Sci Network site, but they're still tweaking them. So we are looking to grow those collections. So if you look today and don't see something that directly is up your alley, check back periodically. We're adding all the time. But we want to hear from you about things that you've tried, successes you've had, challenges you've had. And you can either put that in the chat, or I believe we are able to unmute people if they have ideas. Rihanna, is that correct?
Yeah, I think you can raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted, or if you need to follow up, you can put questions in the chat and we can allow to talk if you'd like to.
Great. So we can answer questions, or we'd love to hear your own stories about successes and challenges.
So I see a question in the chat. I'm happy to read it if that's okay. It says, can you discuss the scaffolded participation approach more, please? Maybe recommend projects that are particularly well set up to have a teacher facilitator and then student accounts. For example, projects where you can set up mini projects within a larger data set. Karen, I think you mentioned something about the scaffolding. Can you field that one?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, and I think now actually the foundations tutorial helps a lot with that scaffolding, because in the tutorial, they do get a bit of experience with an online project and with a field-based project of sharing an observation with, with the Project Squirrel. And so, but it could be, I'm trying to think like what other things might be, but just like other ways of having them do smaller activities that help prepare them for whatever the complexity is of the project that you're having them do. That's a really good question about like mini projects or like student accounts, like under a larger one. I mean, like iNaturalist, like a lot of people set up projects on iNaturalist. It is a platform for that. And there's certainly other platforms for setting up your own project, but maybe that's not really what you're asking. You're asking like, is there an existing project like with its particular goals that can be structured where you as a teacher set up a bunch of student accounts? And I don't know that I have seen that.
Hi, can you hear me? It's Dana.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have worked with the iNaturalist a bit, and we find that teachers are often doing the workaround, and even kind of at our organization, we would share out our iNaturalist login to have multiple people take part. But I'm just wondering if from the science objective, if you've heard of projects where the aim is to have disseminated facilitation. So a project where they're really looking for a local facilitator to take this on, talk to their neighbors about it, or, in the student setting, having the teacher work with students to do some preliminary training and then get on the ground research in place, as a useful intended thing.
Well, Sarah has one answer for you in the chat with Budburst, because I guess they exactly have that.
Oh, yeah, we've been waiting for that in Canada for a long time, but Budburst is a great example, right? Because there's I think you guys had like lesson plans written out where it's really integrated.
Is that for all ages?
Oh, cool. Canada.
And I have that for my project, Crowd the Tap, but just for high schoolers, not for, because it needs to be in homes, not in dorms. So I don't have it really for, but we do have teacher facilitators. But yeah, that would be good to find those resources, because it's actually, for certain projects, it would be a great way. I think it's one of those things. I think a lot of projects don't realize yet that there's a lot of good, like, that there's a lot of instructors in higher ed who would have adult participants, who are students, undergraduates, who could collect good data, and that they could disseminate their projects and have engagement that way. And so I think it's partly just starting to get the word out, because I suspect it could work. It could really work well for a lot of projects and be a really good partnership. I guess the USE Cit Sci Network hopefully will help facilitate that kind of thing.
Yeah, in a couple of years, we have budgeted to actually work with citizen science projects to where we will, pair instructors with projects to kind of look at, can they either, frame the projects such that they have teacher facilitators in classes, or at the very least create materials that higher ed instructors could use in order to facilitate their project being used in higher ed settings. And we have, actual money available to pair people together to create these resources in the future. So we will definitely be soliciting projects and instructors in a couple of years to make some of those resources, but we're just not quite there yet. Yeah, and Rihanna's been putting a lot of good links in the chat about various things that people have been mentioning.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to all 4 of the webinars from the 2020 Happy Hour series that most of the folks on today where we got to dive deeper into some of these topics. So there's a whole webinar, for example, on selecting a project. There's a whole one on project assessment. One I linked to earlier on using citizen science in non-STEM courses. So there's some good examples there for those of you that were interested. And then I think one more generally just on using citizen science in online environments. So if you are still doing remote or have online course options, some good tips there.
Well, while we're waiting for people to share more, I'll share that once I assigned that online project that was mentioned earlier, the camera trap one, where people classify the images. And I didn't reach out to the project managers beforehand. I just assigned it, and they put it up in bundles, like they rotate through. And it was a class of 300 students, and I required them to each do 50 annotations. And they finished it before all the students had a chance to. So a lot of students came to it and they're like, oh my God, there's no more photos. And it was easy solved because there's always more. Like I just had to get another project. There's a zillion of those. But anyway, just letting you know, some of these, they can work through them.
Yeah. Another question, the question that came up earlier about scaffolding and examples. I think one of some examples I can think of is, if it's a project where students have to be able to, say, identify something, then I think you really do need to practice their taxonomic, either their use of a taxonomic key or, quiz them on their ability to identify things ahead of time, so that they are not, making as many mistakes in the actual process. Or when we were dealing with the Caterpillars Count project, one of the things we determined is that students had to estimate lengths of things sometimes. And so we had to give them practice doing that ahead of time, because some people were not very good at that, ahead of time. And so just little things like that, giving them practice on and feedback on ahead of time, I think can make a difference. Because some people, don't want to provide bad data. They just don't realize they are, if they don't have the skill set or the confidence that they need. The people who are willfully just falsifying, that's a different boat altogether. But there are things you can do to give people confidence so that they feel like they can contribute quality data.
Yeah, I'll follow that up with even kids know how to take selfies, but they don't necessarily know how to take a good picture of an insect. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of training.
One thing we found too, when we asked students to reflect on some of their experiences, the data quality issue was very interesting in how students perceive that. Some people were, really invigorated by the idea that anybody can contribute data and this is so fabulous, and other people were like, oh my God, I don't trust any of this because anybody can contribute data and I know what my classmate is like and I don't trust anything that they do, And so I think having some discussions about those sorts of things, and some projects actually, have filters to look for data that seem off, like the Appalachian State student having something from Australia, and I think, it's worth discussing those things with students because they may not realize that ahead of time. And it could actually make them less confident in the quality of the data that's being put out there if they don't understand that there are checks and balances. Let's see, are there any advice on having students use their own phones for submitting data? And this also can play into geolocation, how have you guys dealt with things that require students to do something that shows where they are physically located at a particular time? Anybody have any advice on that?
I don't know if I have advice on that, but I have thought long and hard about that. As a social researcher, it's always surprising to me that, when we want to do research, we have to jump through so many hoops with institutional review boards to be able to go gather data. But sometimes when we incorporate citizen science into our classes, we might require that students contribute their data. And so there's a strange sort of issue there. I have not had students do a project where identifiable information of the students would be a problem, but that is certainly an important consideration in any sort of effort.
So I see in the chat, Dana has offered that like you could do a worksheet option available so that somebody doesn't have to digitally upload. Now, of course, they would then probably, depending on if you want to contribute it to the project, you would then have to have them go back and at the library or something, upload their data. There are ways that you can create anonymous accounts in some places for some projects. Some teachers, I know some instructors have created one account and given that access information to everybody. But in those cases, you probably do want to talk to the project because that can skew the project's understanding of what's going on. Like they might think, oh, wow, we have this really invested, volunteer who's, providing hundreds and hundreds of data points when actually it's, 300 students in one class, each providing one data point. And those are different things for a project potentially. So I think there are options, but it depends on what information exactly is being required, I think.
Yeah, and I'll say too, I mean, just from giving workshops over the years on it, we always have some instructors who come who are already offering cures, the course-based undergraduate research. So they already have like this amazing system set up where the students are carrying out field research and like a whole research project. And they come and they say, how can we make it citizen science or use citizen science? And I say, why would you want to do that? Like they're getting this amazing research experience. And so I guess, I don't know really my point here other than to say like, it's not like everything needs to involve citizen science. I bet people thought I would never say that. But and there's so many different ways that research experiences can be offered through courses. And sometimes the course-based undergraduate research experience is the best way. And it's amazing when faculty have that ability and are able to offer those kinds of courses. And this like community engaged research, when faculty have relationships with a community partner and can do a community science project, like that's amazing too. Keep doing that. But then there's this whole middle ground of instructors who have, like really large classes, whatever, remote classes, or sometimes smaller ones with just like in different fields where there's like their learning objectives really can be met best through having like leveraging citizen science projects in different ways. And so, anyway, I just encourage people to really ask themselves that, like, given your learning objectives, like, is the citizen science project the best solution? Or are there really other ways that you want to meet that goal?
Yeah, great. Alan, did you want to elaborate on anything you put in the chat, or is that covered?
I think that was Dana talking about Caterpillar's count.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
it was.
Alan, thanks. I was just talking about the co-management setting and how that's helpful.
Yeah, for that project in particular, I mean, just as you alluded to, some sites have created a generic Gmail account that all of their volunteers submit data through. And it's pretty straightforward. If you're an instructor, you can have an account and you can also have this intern account or something like that. And if the privacy issues are a concern. And then Carrie also mentioned Aaron Webb, and just going back to Karen's point about, I mean, there's this really interesting Venn diagram of efforts in terms of CURE versus citizen science, and Aaron is another network, and all of these things overlap in various ways, and they're great. There's a new RCN I'm going to a workshop for on Friday called the Biological and Environmental Data Education Network, and I'm being sort of the representative from USE Cit Sci. But so yeah, there's a lot of overlapping educational efforts that involve, getting students to work with and or collect new data, and they don't all have to have the exact same goals. They don't all always share the exact same goals, but that's totally fine. And I think, yeah, the most important question as an instructor is just, what are you trying to achieve? Just as Karen and Tobin talked about, like you start with the learning objectives and then you scale on from there. And if a citizen science project will, you know, help you achieve those objectives, then that's awesome. And here are all of these various tips and resources, et cetera, to do that.
Great. Any last thoughts? That sounds like a good way to sum things up. But does anyone have any last minute questions or additional points they want to make?
Or successes in the classroom that we haven't heard about?
Yeah, great. If you guys want to go ahead and continue to add those to the chat, we can go ahead and close out. So I appreciate everyone for joining today and our presenters for sharing on these great resources. I did want to close out with a plug for CSA membership. One of our things that we love about this community is the ability to meet folks from different backgrounds and disciplines, and it's a great place to have conversations that can give you ideas that you might not have thought about before. So hopefully you've heard some new ideas or thought about citizen science in different contexts today. On CSA Connect, one of the things you can do is join working groups where you can have conversations with folks about topics like education, if that's exciting to you. We also have groups that are exploring research and evaluation. I see Veronica, one of our new co-chairs for that group, on the call today. Data and metadata, all sorts of different things where you can really dive deep and make a difference and help kind of develop tools for the field and resources that will be helpful for other folks. And that's the other thing I wanted to highlight was leadership. And so one of the ways that our working groups move forward is by the energy that our co-chairs bring to these groups. And so thank you to Heather for helping to coordinate this webinar. And we look forward to having more of you join these groups. If you're interested in just seeing what it's all about, you can join CSA Connect for 30 days for free. And I'll drop the link in the chat. If you'd like to do that, we have conversations. There's a message board and different groups that meet regularly.
Yeah, and with that, I'd like to say the Education Working Group is a really diverse group of educators from higher ed, informal education backgrounds, as well as K-12 settings. And so it's really interesting to see some of the similarities and differences across these different approaches. And so I encourage you all to join the working group and get involved in our monthly activities. Great. Well,
thanks everyone. I'll go ahead and end the recording.
Thank you.
And yeah, stay tuned. We'll send out the link to the recording